Rick Collins, welcome to Muscle Talks podcast. How are you, mate?
I'm great. Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
Likewise. You know, we were talking about your tone of voice, like seemingly relaxed, kind of laid back.
Okay.
And I thought to myself, maybe you sound Aussie. Maybe that's why.
Maybe. Really? Yeah, maybe in another life. It could be. I was born and raised in New York. That's where I come from. But I've traveled around enough. I haven't gotten to Australia yet. Not yet to the land down under, but I've heard great things. It's on my list. Trust me, it's on my list. But I've traveled all over the country and a lot of Europe and some Asia. So maybe I've lost that real New York accent at some point along the way.
There it is.
There you go.
So
forget about it.
Yeah. So tell me, forget about it. Tell me something. Tell me something. Who's got an accent here? You or me? you know, if I reckon.
I guess it depends who's listening. I would imagine that any listeners you have in Australia are like, man, that guy's accent, that guy Collins' accent is crazy. Yeah. But I have a feeling that if there are, listeners here in the United States, I think you're the one with the accent, my friend.
It's funny. I talked to Monica Brandt, right? And I was talking to Joanne. I forgot her surname. I just had her on the podcast. Oh God, I can't believe it. But we share WhatsApp messages, and sometimes we're talking, and the girls go, "It's so funny listening to Steve's accent." I said, "Who the fuck's got an accent here? You girls have got an accent. She's got a Pommy accent, and Monica's got a kind of like a Texan kind of, country girl accent." So we all kind of laugh away that, I just said, "I don't have the accent, girls. You do." So
yeah, no, I get it. It's all in the ear of the beholder, as they say.
Ear of the beholder. Before we, like I said, Chris tells me the first 10 minutes has got to be the spicy first 10 minutes. We want to, and obviously you studied law, do some acting, bodybuilding. You've even competed, and you've told me there are a lot of and I guess the bodybuilding area is a lot of where you learn some discipline, and I guess the discipline is working backwards, right? Working backwards. I'm going to go with this, working backwards. So for me, growing up, Rick, I'm 57, going to the gym was just meatheads. It was a meathead place. And I think the gym for me was a place where it kept us off the street, right? And if we look at the gym as well, we never thought we were the most educated in there, and nor were we. I didn't really see lawyers in there at that time. I didn't see accountants. You didn't see very much. Maybe some tradies, guys on the tools. And speaking to some of the bodybuilders like Marvelous Melvin, Anthony, some of the guys actually did time and noticed that going to jail, they got jacked. So they saw that as a free gym membership. It's funny how we saw the gym to give us discipline when yourself, an educated man, found discipline. But now I'm going fast forward to today. I found that the gym and its protocols seems to work now in all environments, from entrepreneurship, where even if you're a pristine athlete or a high-level corporate, it seems like it's chicken and rice. Your diet is so important. Your focus is so important. Your disciplines are so important. A structure of structure. It's not about anymore the going at lunch, drinking obliviously and not coming back for the rest of the day after a meeting with someone. Right. So what has changed, and why has bodybuilding, which you've captured so well, kind of now touching on everyone's life and careers, and yours?
Yeah, I think there's definitely been a mainstreaming of muscle that's occurred since my days in law school. Yeah. I can tell you, I was probably one of two law students in my law school many years ago who were into fitness. I had just been competing in bodybuilding. So I competed in collegiate bodybuilding, won some trophies, had a great little run in my late teens and 20-ish. And so when I started law school, I was jacked. I didn't look like the other law students.
You would have been a standout. Yeah.
Definitely had a different look. And I think back then it was definitely more out there, more niche. And I think back then there were assumptions that the other students made about me. That look at this meathead, he's probably not smart, he's going to probably fail out his first year, whatever. And they didn't realize I was one of the very few, if not the only, law student who was there on a full academic scholarship. Wow. So I had done really well in college. I did really well on the prep course for law school, my LSATs. So I was there on a full academic scholarship. I made law review the first year, which, are top of the class for law school. And I think I defied the expectations then. Now I think things are different. I think the average person is now much more likely to be going to the gym, to be thinking about how much protein they take in. Look at just the way products now, you go to like a coffee shop and there's, do you want protein added to it? Everybody is now really kind of gotten the message that, a certain amount of good fats are healthy, that protein should be what you base your eating around. I'll never forget when I was probably 20, I went to my annual physical with my doctor, who was as skinny as this. And he looked at me and I'm all jacked up and he's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Look at you. You gotta stop lifting the weights. You gotta stop." I'm like, "Why?" He goes, "Because it's bad. It's bad for your heart. It's bad for your joints. So what should I be doing?" I said. He goes, "Well, you just cardio. That's all you need." And even then, at 20 years old, listening to this guy, I knew he didn't know what the F he was talking about. I knew then. And of course, now the public has the message. You can't go anywhere without hearing that muscle is the organ of health, that the research now shows the more muscle you carry, the longer, the better quality, the health span, the lifespan improve. So it's completely correlated. More muscle is more health. So I think we've gotten that message now that we didn't have, 30, 40 years ago. But, and I think that's a good thing. The gyms are filled. I still train at, I don't know if you've ever been to New York, but we call it the East Coast Mecca. It is the most hardcore gym here I think in New York and on the East Coast. Maybe I'm biased, but it's Bev Francis. And Bev, of course, is, an Aussie, right? Yeah. So Bev Francis and Steve Weinberger opened a gym a number of years ago here in New York. And they've expanded it through the years. It's great. I mean, the variety of equipment is absolutely awesome. And so I've been there for 25, close to 30 years training at Bev's. Great gym. And it's for people of all, there's competitors there. You see some, famous celebrity, bodybuilders there, but you also see average everyday people. It's a great environment where, nobody really is made to feel out of place. If somebody is uncertain how to do an exercise, there's the biggest, most jack guy in the gym is walking over to help them. Yeah. So it's a great atmosphere, and I think we really have mainstreamed bodybuilding in a very positive way.
Hey guys, Steve here. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. You know the drill. We'd love you to subscribe. We'd love you to hit the notification bell. Why? It gets us out there, allows us to go and get bigger, better, greater. We've already had some great guests, as you know, but we want to continue this. We want to continue this journey with you. So if you could, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you're notified each time we put up a new podcast. Thank you for allowing me to take you away from the podcast. Let's get back to it. I've said, and I had Jim Mentis, and he was wondering, when he first initially asked, when he first saw me, he goes, "Who's this guy? Why should he have a bodybuilding podcast?" And it's true, why should I have one after 3 years? Even I laugh, it's by accident this started. But he asked me, why I started training, or what was it with me? And then he realized I had a true love affair with bodybuilding, a true love affair. Look, I've never competed, but the thing I needed something personal. It had to be very personal to me, right? And so what I mean by that is that I still focused on a career. I was a network engineer. So I worked for HSBC, but you couldn't take away bodybuilding. I had to have it in my life, right? And I tell people today, there's two things you can never take out of my life: my Harley Davidson and bodybuilding. No one can take that out of my life. My kids have to come along with that. My partner has to come along with that. I will not give up those two things. You can't ask me to stop training. Imagine it's
non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable. It's a non-negotiable. Yeah. And the thing is, I guess where it is today as well, I knew that I was career-based, and career-based meant, promotions, money, investing, buying whatever, properties, been trying to be entrepreneurship somewhere else. But I knew bodybuilding allowed me to turn up my best self. And I got a feeling today, a lot of people are feeling like that, and looking at the professions out there and looking at them train, and also seeing some of the guys that are on stage too. There are some smart cookies. There are some people that are really going for it in life. And they're not just, sitting on bodybuilding alone. What they're doing is aspiring professionals, may they be lawyers, may they be even actors, may they be whatever they are, entrepreneurs. But it seems like this gym environment gives them something, a release that gives them peace to go and do what they need to do in this world.
Yeah. So, well, two things. One, I remember after a particular contest I was in, a guy came over to me who was a manager of a local gym that was known as sort of the hardcore enhancement gym, so to speak. And I had taken second in the show, and he came over and said, "Oh, you got robbed. You should have had first." And he said, "Listen, come over to the gym that I'm managing." And it was Steve Mihalik's gym. Steve was a Mr. Universe, as you probably know, and had a very hardcore gym many years ago. And he's like, "Come over and we'll put you on a program, and we'll make you, bring you to greatness. We'll make you a pro or whatever." And this is back when not everybody got a pro card.
Yes.
And I had already applied for law school. I had been accepted in law school. I had my scholarship, and I didn't come from a lot of money, for sure. I worked my way through college. I was a nightclub bouncer, throwing people out of bars. And then the next morning, I would get up and I'd do personal training. I was working in a gym as a personal trainer. And then on some days, I was working as a nursing home orderly, which is one of the toughest jobs you can imagine doing. And so I was working those three jobs. And so now I had the opportunity to go to law school. And of course, every bodybuilder, 19, 20 years old, is thinking, stars in their eyes about what they could do in the sport. But I think I kind of had the feeling that I should go in the direction of really following my professional career as a lawyer. And so I stopped competing. I closed that box and went in this other direction. But the funny thing about life, my friend, is that sometimes you wind up in the same place as had you taken the other road in some respects. So even though I went into law, I graduated law school, I became an assistant district attorney. So I was putting the bad guys in jail as a prosecutor, got trial experience doing that, then opened up my own firm, did bread and butter criminal defense for a period of time. But timing is everything. And the year that the United States Congress made anabolic steroids into a controlled substance, put it into the same act with cocaine and heroin and methamphetamine and other drugs of abuse, was the year that I hung out my shingle with some partners as a private practice lawyer. And back then, now you suddenly had Congress saying steroids are like other drugs of abuse. But you had criminal defense lawyers who had no idea how to defend a case or what it even was. You had police officers and federal agents who were clueless. You had judges and prosecutors who didn't know what it was all about. And so I started getting cases from people arrested suddenly, gym bros, who are suddenly arrested as if they're like a steroid, what are you talking about?
A murderer. So they're like a murderer.
Right. It was crazy. And information gap. And so I started handling some of the cases and writing about this information gap trying to educate the people in the courts and educate the people in the gyms that the law had changed, and here's what's going on. And I created a website called Steroid Law at steroidlaw.com, and it was to bridge that gap. And then John Romano, who was the editor-in-chief of Muscular Development magazine, asked me to write. And so I started writing a column on law and policy and culture, dealing with the bodybuilding community. And I did that for almost 25 years and wound up doing consulting on a movie called Bigger, Stronger, Faster, which was about all of these performance-enhancing issues with Chris Bell, the director, who became a good friend of mine. And so I wound up deeper into the bodybuilding community, I think, than I ever would have been if I had continued competing. And then what? At some point, selling cars or So it's been amazing because I represented Ben Weider in the IFBB for many years, did a lot of work for Ben.
What a privilege.
Including when another Australian, Lee Priest, had a falling out with Ben Weider at one time, and kind of tried to resolve that issue. And I wound up finding my way into Arnold Schwarzenegger's office before he was actually governor, and spending some time with him. My firm represented Sylvester Stallone on one of his endeavors when he had a supplement company called InStone Nutrition. Yep. So I wound up deep in bodybuilding. I've represented many pro bodybuilders when they've gotten into some type of trouble or another, often involving, performance enhancement drugs, but sometimes other issues. I was involved in Sean Roden's defense a number of years ago when he had a problem in Utah. So I'm just grateful. I feel so blessed that, I had the road that I went on. There's a writer named Malcolm Gladwell who wrote a book called Outliers, and it's about what makes people successful in life. And one of the big factors is timing. And the fact that I hung out my shingle the same year that steroids became criminalized by the U.S. Congress, I was in the right place with the right knowledge set and the right connections and the right skills, courtroom skills combined with gym knowledge that really catapulted me to a monopolistic position. There's really been no other lawyer that does what I do. I've practiced law in 40 different federal courthouses across the country. I've handled matters internationally. I've had cases in Europe and elsewhere. I've represented athletes who are accused of doping in situations, including professional athletes, when they, are accused of using a banned substance in a particular sport. So it's just been an incredible ride. And getting to the second point that you kind of were touching on, I think being a bodybuilder, especially a competitive bodybuilder, but any bodybuilder, gives you an advantage in whatever it is you're going to do in life.
100%.
Because if you're putting the time in, nobody grows an 18-inch arm by accident, right? You grow it by getting into the gym day in and day out. So it teaches you patience. It's not coming tomorrow. No. It's going to take weeks. It's going to take months. It's going to take years. You've got to be committed to that, and you've got to persevere. You've got to be dedicated. And you're right. You have to sacrifice, because when all of your friends are going out partying, blow off the gym, go away, do this, do that. If you stand firm and I Saturday's leg day or whatever it is, and you keep putting that time in, and you'll get injuries. There's going to be situations where, you're sick, or you tear a hamstring, whatever happens. And so now you've got to train around that injury. Now you've got to come up with ways of continuing to move forward while at the same time, making some very important choices on exactly what to do. So finding ways around a problem. You're exercising all of these abilities, and I think the sacrifice, the dedication, the perseverance, all of that makes a huge difference, and you can apply it to whatever it is you're doing in life.
Yeah, I mean, I just got so excited to talk. Like I thought to myself, Rick Collins, an attorney. What are we going to talk about with bodybuilding? But so far, what I've listened to and just the stories you've shared, and like you said, Steve Jobs. I think you can find it on YouTube. It's called Joining the Dots. I don't know if you heard about. He's got the Joining the Dots. He talks about if you go back, you'll see all the dots that lead you to today. If you go back, you can find. So he goes back to even his university days, and he was studying something quite. I don't know what he was studying. It was something prominent. I don't know what it was, but he just loved writing letters. I think it's called calligraphy, something like that. I don't know, whatever it's called.
Calligraphy, yes.
Calligraphy.
Yes.
So he decided at university to study calligraphy. I mean, where are you going and that is your career? Come on. He hasn't got Apple in mind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like imagine you're telling your family and your friends you're giving up something that, like, he's probably studying law and he's going, I'm going calligraphy. Yep. And they're going, you're a nutcase, right? And that's why, sorry, I'm going to just segue. That's why sometimes with our kids and people that talk to us and the youth, we've got to be careful we don't put roadblocks on them. We've got to stand out of their way. Sometimes they're telling us what they want to do. Because my daughter's currently, I keep saying this, she's in New York at the moment. She's in Long Island.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's where I am.
Oh, man, you got to look after my daughter. She's only 22 and she just arrived. She's been there for 4 weeks. And she's
wow. Okay.
Yeah, she's
take her under my wing.
Please, mate. Yeah, she needs strong men, like strong.
Is she in school here?
No. She's 22 and she studied performing arts at an elite school here in Australia, and she's actually got her own cabaret show on one of the ocean liners on the Caribbean there. But currently, before she gets on the boat in Texas somewhere, and then off she goes, Caribbean and Mexico and all those areas. Her office and where she works is in New York. So she's getting used to being in New York. It's her first overseas trip as well. So, yeah. So
wow. Okay.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is, what do I know about performing arts? What do I know about careers and everything that you seemingly people talk about in life? Like, forgive me if I say this, like if I said to people, oh, my daughter's studying law, they'll go, oh, fantastic. Oh, she's studying medicine. Oh my God, amazing. And when you go, oh, she's studying performing arts, and they go, oh, that's nice. Like, what I mean is,
all right, well, yeah.
You know what I'm trying to say.
But you got to follow your heart, and I'm sure she's following it. And it's funny. I have 2 daughters.
Yes.
And my older daughter went down the same kind of path that so they're both in their 30s now. Yes. But my older one went and got a musical theater major degree. Yes. And so she kicked around New York City looking for work as an actress, and she did that. She got some roles here and there. She did a production of Grease at one point out in the Midwest. I went and saw her there as Frenchie. But ultimately she came and she decided, you know what, I want to do something different. And so she followed in my footsteps, and she's working as a prosecutor in the Bronx now. Oh. So, and I do think, following up on what we were saying about bodybuilding, I think that a background in performing arts is also very helpful to being a lawyer.
Yeah.
Or anything that requires public speaking, because I was also an actor. I came from an actor background. I was a theater minor in college, and I've been the lead villain in some very terrible sci-fi comedy movies. Yes. You can look me up on the Internet Movie Database, and you'll see some of what I've done. But I've also done some stage work. I did a production of a show called Line in the city, as well as many plays and stage plays in different places. I've done some television. I had a tiny walk-on in a little show you may have heard of called The Sopranos in the first season of it. But I say that if you're comfortable on stage or in front of a camera, you will be a better trial lawyer, because you've got to get up in front of a jury. You've got to make like the questions that your witness just got asked on cross-examination didn't hurt your case. You have to be able to connect with the jury or the judge and really win the case through your own persuasiveness. And if you're not comfortable, they say that the biggest fear that people have, even more than death, is public speaking. So many people are afraid of public speaking. It's terrifying to so many people. But you're not going to be a great trial lawyer if you can't overcome that. And certainly acting is one way to do that.
To touch on a bit more with the acting and everything you've done, and also being a lawyer, do you need sometimes like an alter ego? Do you need to put on is there a stage guy? Is there a lawyer guy? Like sometimes you go, right, I'm about to open the courtroom doors. Rick, you're staying behind, and whatever you've decided to call yourself, you've walked in there and you're going, we're going in as Bruce. Like, is there a case? Go on.
I think some people do that. Yes. I've never done that. And I think that's in part why I've, to whatever success I've had, I would attribute to the authenticity of not being something other than intrinsically what I am. If you go to my Instagram, Rick Collins ESQ on Instagram, you will see that what you get there is what you're getting here, or what you'd get if you came and worked out with me at Bev's, or if you saw me in a courtroom. I'm the guy that I am, and whether I'm acting in a TV series, or whether I'm advocating for a client in court, or whether I'm in the gym working out, or any combination thereof, you'll see that represented. All of those things you'll find on my Instagram page. It's not like I say, okay, this page is for Rick Collins, the lawyer, and now I'm going to make this page for Rick Collins, the bodybuilder. And no, it is who I am. And I don't, try to show myself or portray myself in anything other than who I am and what I am, like it or not. With all with the good and the bad and the ugly. That's kind of the way I present it. So I appreciate all who follow me on Instagram, and because that's probably where I'm most active. And it's, what I love is that when I have clients on cases, criminal defense cases, and I try to get the best possible. I love to win, and that's part of it. I think that sort of competitive spirit is what compels us to. And after the case is done, so many of my clients follow me on my social media. They want to continue to be kind of part of the journey, and we become friends. I have many of my past clients are my friends, and I'm sure some of them are watching this right now. I love that. I love that. Many of the people that I represent are good bros. They're the kind of guys that you'd ask for a spot in your gym or mine. And they get caught up in switches. They're not bad people. And so I'm grateful to be able to have the very, as Liam Neeson would say, the very particular set of skills that enable me to help people in a way that others can't.
I will hunt you down. Yeah, no, I love that. So, because like I said, people are listening, and the youth today and everything going on. You mentioned you had 3 jobs. Now, firstly, I'm thinking you don't sound European, because I'm European and I had 3 jobs. And I remember giving up one of my jobs, and my parents turned to me and said, why? I said to them, listen, I'm supposed to have 1 job, not 3. Like, allow me to get, but I was studying, and to be honest, I never studied, Rick, I don't know, but I became a network engineer through hard work, networking, and just starting from the mailroom. I'm the Michael J. Fox starting in the mailroom type kid, and then he just works his way up, right? And at the same time, I used to do kitchen hand work or waiter work, and I did door work as well. And I studied personal training, but I never really trained anyone. So I did personal training because I studied it anyway as well. That's the only thing I studied, actually. And you said you didn't come from much. So it meant you went and did these 3 jobs to get you somewhere, and there was a reason.
Sure.
What could you tell the youth today that seemingly life seems out of reach, but sometimes what they don't have, understand they have time on their hands, and you're not going to get everything today. And the fact is that you might be working 3 jobs for 2 years, but you don't understand in those 2 years how much income you probably can make and put aside if you do it smart.
Absolutely. And, you're going to learn something from whatever you do. You don't have to do it forever, but if you work as a carpenter, if you work as a plumber, if you work in a mail room, like you said, you will learn from that and take that with you on your next phase of your journey. We all go through different phases or different chapters of our life. And so, pick up something learn from something wherever you are and take that to the next chapter.
Yeah, 100%. And like I said, you just said something, it's not forever. So if you do take on, a second job because you're trying to save for a deposit for a house or something that you're planning, it's not a forever thing. I mean, your forever thing should be the career you really want. I mean, that one, if that's what you want to do. And it's like bodybuilding as well. I suppose everyone doesn't understand that you just need to schedule it in. Bodybuilding might not be 6 p.m. going after work to the gym. You might need to do it during your lunch hour. Hey, you might need to hurt and get up at 4 a.m. and do it before work. I think everyone thinks they can't fit it in. I can fit it in, trust me. When people tell me they can't fit it in, I'm thinking, what do you mean you can't fit it in? Because there's 2 pains, the pain of not going or the pain of getting up at a ridiculous hour in the morning and going. And I know the one that hurts the most, and that's the one not going. When I know
Absolutely.
Not going is the most pain you'll ever have. Tell me,
are you a night guy, or are you a night guy or a morning guy for training?
Okay, so during the week, I'm an afternoon, evening guy during the week because I've realized bodybuilding doesn't. Well, the podcast gives us a bit of money, but bodybuilding doesn't really pay me my bills. So if I'm not on the phone doing emails, networking 9 to 5, then what am I doing? What am I doing? Because that's what I'm chasing: business, money, career. So get out of my way. But bodybuilding, as soon as I see 5 p.m., I'm already having pre-workout stuff. I'm already pre-workout. I'm even at 4 o'clock. I've got bananas out and I've got this out. I'm already preparing for 5 p.m. No one understands. See, that's us bodybuilders. We're already, and off I am. Now on the weekends, I tend to like getting up, and if it's that nice morning that just a light breakfast maybe. Sort my dogs out.
Get it out of the way.
Yeah, I get on my hog. I ride my hog to the gym. And then I have a workout, and then I ride to my local cafe on the way home, and I just sit there having an espresso or a long black. Yeah, and then I go home, and then maybe I've got chores on. I don't want to say that, or whatever I've got going on. But you
got the whole day.
Yeah, but usually it's afternoon, evenings, late afternoon, evenings, Monday to Friday. Saturday, Sunday, I like to go in the morning. So if it's like I said, last night was for me. Last night was leg day, and I really wasn't in the mood for it. But I didn't make myself in the mood for it. I built the mood in. So I didn't go hard because I really didn't want to do it. But as I build momentum, we started stacking weights on, and I started saying, now we're in it now. And my dad used to say, when you're on the dance floor, you start dancing. So in life, if you know what I mean? If you go,
once you get into that gym, you're going to train.
You're going to train.
I've been very fortunate in that regard for some reason, and I don't know if it's true for everybody, but it's always been true for me. When I park my car and I walk toward the door of the gym and I open that door, whatever troubles, cares, concerns, problems have just been weighing me down like a big sack over my shoulder, I feel like I can put it down.
Left them at the door.
Before I go through before I go through and by the time I come out, I try always to train to train as hard as I can. I try to train with intensity in every workout. And by the time I go, exhausted, tired, pumped, I go back out that door, and that bag is so much smaller and lighter than it was. It really, for me, it's almost been therapeutic. And I think people who really are dedicated and committed and never really take long periods of time off have that experience. It's almost therapeutic, and it really is something that you do enjoy. I'm on the same schedule as you too, because somewhat. So I train late at night. I train. I when my kids were little, I got into the habit of training at like 9:30 at night after I put them to bed. Now I train at 8:30. I have a little training posse, and we hit the gym at 8:30 on the weekends. Usually 10:30 or so in the morning on Saturday and Sunday. But many years ago, when I was competing, I trained with a biker, a biker from Long Island, and he was a badass. This was a hard guy, Phil. Phil Sausto, his name was, and he's a friend of mine to this day. But he was very competitive. And when we went to the gym, I knew you had to bring your A game, because it was like always a brutal, whatever. If I did 10 reps, he'd do 11. If he did 11, I'd do 12. And he wanted to train early in the morning at like 4 in the morning when the gym opened. We were actually given the key one summer, and we would open the gym in the morning. And I'll tell you, he was such a badass that I was a bouncer and, whatever, a tough guy to whatever I thought I was. I wasn't going to cross this guy. And so when he told me not 4 in the morning, I would be there on time. This guy would probably come to my house and drag me out my window and drag me to the gym. So you get used to it. And so whatever, finding time to train now is easy, because I'm not training at 4 in the morning. Everything is a cakewalk compared to that.
Oh, 100%. But you mentioned also intensity. There's this debate at the moment of, as you get older, you can't be as intense. But I can tell you, you're right. For about 97% of people, the 3% understand excuse my French, it's fucking intensity. I think they've got it all wrong. And I'll tell you where I think they've got it wrong, Rick. I was talking to my brother-in-law yesterday, and he asked me a question, and he said, I'm talking about exercise and pushing. He goes, he's 70 and looks great. He's, but he doesn't really go to the gym, but he pushes it. And he goes to me, and I said, no, you got to do a bit of progressive overload. You've got to be intense. And he goes to me, how much do you bench press or incline? I said, look, I don't do barbell as much. It's mostly dumbbells, but I think my max at the moment is we do kilos, 26 kilos on each arm. 26 kilos on each arm. I don't know what that is in pounds. What's that in pounds, Chris?
Like double?
Double? It'd probably double in pounds, close to double in pounds. I'm just thinking.
2.2, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Now that's max. That's max. But I said to him, I said, what's yours? And he said something like, he goes, mine is 10 kilos. I said his name's Cleo. I said, Cleo, the average guy like you, without sounding average, I said, is probably 10 kilos because you're 70.
Right.
But why do you fucking want to be average? You should be doing 15 kilos.
Right.
So I'm not asking you to lift like a 20-year-old. That's why I think we make the mistake. We all think, everyone believes we've got to lift like we're 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds. No, just don't lift like an average 50-year-old. Don't lift like an average. That's progressive, meaning you're exhausting your age that you are to the best of your abilities to just push that little bit further. We're not asking for you to go repeat, PBs and what you did in your 30s or when you're on the biggest gear or whatever you're doing at the time. It's more or less being realistic of, are you getting stronger as you age? Because I think that's what we really need is to be a little bit stronger than the average.
Hey guys, Nutrition Warehouse, your number one store for all your supplement needs. Visit in-store here in Australia or New Zealand, or go to nutritionwarehouse.com.au, or for our New Zealanders, go to nutritionwarehouse.co.nz, shop away, and at checkout, why not use discount code MTP15 to get 15% off all your orders.
Yeah, and to hold as much muscle as you can, because after a certain, whether it's 40 or 45 or whatever age you think, is the statistics show that little by little you start losing some muscle. It's very hard to keep it. If you do nothing about it, you're just going to lose muscle every year. So the way that you preserve it is by training, and there's different ways of making it, bringing intensity to it. Do you need to be doing singles and doubles on the bench press like you did when you were 20 or 25 years old? Probably not a good idea. For me, both shoulders, I've been training literally 50 years. So 50 years of wear and tear, you're going to have some arthritic issues. You're going to have some rotator cuff issues. So you may not want to be hitting your my best gym bench was 440 at about 200. Well, that's 440 pounds. I don't know what that would be in kilos. I guess 200 kilos or something. I don't know. But and that was at 220 pounds, which I guess is maybe 100 kilos in weight. But would I do that now? No. Will I train intensely on machines? Yes. Do I try to keep, finding ways to make it intense, whether it's slowing down the negative on the rep or, finding a new exercise that I'm not used to that challenges that. So there's many ways of intensifying, maybe keeping the reps up at 12 or 15 or 20. There's no rule that says you have to stop at 10, right?
100%.
So, finding the ways of making it intense. And I think that's what keeps it interesting. We find, my training partners and I find different ways of making the workouts interesting and different. We have certain exercises. You'll find when you reach a certain age, there are certain machines that won't hurt, and so they'll feel good, right? So you're a little reluctant to start doing things that you never tried before, which you could do when you were 25 or 30, but it's a little bit tougher. But I still am excited to train, and I love it, and I'll do it until the very end. And you can see that if you see my Instagram that I still try to train heavy and to, within limitations. I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but last year I did a skydive that didn't work out too well.
What happened?
And so I have a USPA skydiver's license. I've done a few jumps, and I was recertifying, and I did a jump earlier in the day.
This is on your own. This is on your own. A skydive on your own.
Yeah, this is on my own. This is on my own. 14,000 foot.
Now I'm sweating. Go on.
So well, let me say this. So I did the first skydive, probably 15 years ago, and I did it because I was getting a little bit concerned about heights. I was up on my roof doing something at one point, and I started getting this little queasy feeling being on the roof, and I'm like, I never had that before. And I had written a book with a co-author called Alpha Male Challenge, the Alpha Male Challenge. And what it kind of was about is for guys of a certain age, maybe 30s, 40s, 50s, to kind of reclaim your mojo and really find the inner beast in you again. And so it was an exercise and nutrition and attitude book about really, confronting your fears. Whatever, nothing grows in a safe space, right? That's death. So you want to always challenge yourself. You always do what you're scared of. Do what you're afraid of.
Face it.
And so I said, well, the way I'll overcome my queasiness of the heights will be to do a skydive. I did it for charity. I raised some money for charity.
That's a bit extreme, but go on. That's a bit extreme.
It's a bit extreme, yeah. Well, the extremity bodybuilders tend to.
I'll put a disclaimer under that for people that they don't need to go from your
Don't
roof.
try this at home.
Don't go from your roof to skydiving immediately. You may like to try other things.
But although I will say, I do think everybody benefits from a tandem jump. I think that kind of a tandem jump with an experienced
I don't know if I could
skydiver.
do it. I don't know if I could do it.
Man, it's very empowering. And the more frightened you are to do it,
oh no!
trust me, the more frightened you are to do it, the more you will get out of it, because you will, when you land safely, and statistically, you will land safely. Statistically, when you do,
have you been watching? Have you been watching IG lately with all the accidents I'm watching people have these days?
Yeah, I've been watching it, but yeah,
so
it is. You will feel like you've ticked. Like you've kicked death in the nuts, and there is a great feeling out of it. But at any rate, of course, I took it to a higher degree, and I combination of human error and problems. I wound up hitting the ground at a very high velocity.
Wow.
Last May, and got pretty badly hurt, broke some ribs and cracked my pelvis on both sides, and completely tore my knee up, severed my PCL, and a number of other injuries from a high impact landing. And and again, it's do what you're afraid of, and I did. But to me, I could have just said, all right, well, that's the end of training. Look, I got my knees banged up, and I'm all banged up. But I didn't, and I was back in the gym as soon as I could. And I do believe, and the doctors all said, that the amount of muscle that I carried was a huge factor in survivability. There's no question about it.
Wow.
You've encased yourself with a certain amount of muscle armor, and so you're shielding your vital organs from some of the impact. And there's no question, all of the doctors said that. But it also played a role in recovery, because I was back in the gym, and my legs are as strong as they were before the accident. And I credit I had a great physical therapist, guy named Mike Camp, who I give a shout out to, one of the best at trainers at Bev's. He's there all the time too. And so I'm very grateful to have survived that and come out okay. No surgery.
Wow.
Just one of the, somehow was able to, I landed in a muddy field, a sugar field plantation that had been recently irrigated. So a combination of the muscularity and the softness of the mud, I think. Now I hit it at a high speed with a partially opened parachute, probably traveling at maybe 40 miles an hour or something like that, maybe a little bit faster. But here I am, and I'm grateful to be here.
Besides, oh shit, or oh my God, what were you thinking at the time before the impact?
I think there's the male brain is a problem-solving brain.
Yep.
So, as I'm going, I'm looking at the problem. I actually cut away my chute. I pulled my reserve. I was trying to figure out how I fix the problem. I had one toggle that was working, one toggle that wasn't, which if both toggles worked, you'd be able to flare the canopy and slow your descent. With one working, you're not really, you have no control. And so for that minute or so of free fall, I was still trying to figure out, how do I right this ship? How do I fix this? And it was only really at the last, as I see the earth rushing up toward me, that you realize, I'm not going to have time to fix. I've run out of time. I've run out of runway. And at that moment, I will say, it's just like, okay, well, this sucks, and I didn't, at that last second, I'm not sure that I really expected to be here, and because I hit the ground, it felt like I'd been hit by a Mack truck.
Yeah.
And then I'm on the ground, and I open my eyes, and I'm like, well, that ain't St. Peter, I'm not at the, I don't see any pearly gates. Yeah. So, and I'm looking, I'm like, man, this looks like Earth. Am I still here? Yeah. And I wiggled my fingers, I wiggled my toes, and I'm like, all right, I think I'm functional enough. I'm going to get up. So immediately, and the adrenaline is just, pumping, spurting like a fire hydrant of adrenaline. And I stood up, and I somehow in the impact or whatever, I'd lost a sneaker. And so I'm looking around trying to figure out I just bought them. They were a pair of Hokas. And I'm looking around trying to find where the heck that sneaker went. And then I see on the horizon the little pickup truck appears, and two of the people from the drop zone come running out. Rick, are you okay? Are you okay? I don't know if they thought that they'd find me. They certainly didn't expect me to be standing. I thought they probably were in a recovery, recover the body kind of mission. And so they come running out, and the first thing I said to them was, "Yeah, I'm okay, but can you help me find my sneaker?" And so
you got your priorities right.
Don't worry about the sneaker, dude. Can you walk? And I'm like, yeah, of course I can walk. And then when I started walking, that's when I realized, I'm not breathing too well. And, this knee really hurts a lot. And so ultimately, they took me to the hospital. I was there for a little while, for a number of days. But, broken ribs are not a lot of fun because it's hard to breathe and it's hard to laugh. The last thing you want is anything funny, because it's very, very painful. But, look, I do think that bodybuilders have a higher pain threshold than most people. We do it every night. We do it every night. Yeah, you're putting yourself into the pain zone, right? I mean, that when you do that 10th rep and it hurts, and then you try for the 11th, there's a certain masochistic quality to it, right? I mean, I know this is going to hurt, and I'm going to do it anyway. And so once you kind of get used to being in the pain zone, I think it's easier to deal with whatever pain gets thrown your way.
Well, as we age, but I think as well, being bodybuilders or training hard at the gym, when do you not feel like your parachute hasn't opened up just going to the bathroom in the middle of the night, when you feel all this pain? You feel like you're doing the Thriller film clip, walking, right? Or you're getting up in the morning after a leg workout, and even though it all hurts, you automatically believe you had a good workout. When it doesn't hurt, that's when you realize, hey, I didn't
wasted my time.
I wasted my time at the fucking gym. I was supposed to be hurting this morning. How am I getting out of this chair okay? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So why am I getting out of the bed without assistance? You know what I mean? So definitely we are masochists, if that's what it's called, in relation to
no doubt about it.
So tell me, steroids. Let's go with steroids. And obviously, you would have studied it in legal perspective, in legal ways to reference things. How far back do steroids go?
So, from a historical perspective,
what do you know yourself in relation to steroids and their use in a way?
Yeah. So, I'd say steroids testosterone was first isolated in the 1930s.
Yep.
And in the 50s, I think, is when Dianabol was kind of being cooked up somewhere in Pennsylvania or something. And then by the 70s, bodybuilders had discovered steroids. And by the 80s, they were pretty prevalent in hardcore bodybuilding. I don't think that anybody at the time looked at steroids as drugs in the classic recreational way. I think they were almost like a super vitamin that people were using to enhance their training.
Like a peptide back then, like what we see peptides today.
Kind of, yeah.
But
like
how they looked at back
then,
then, yeah.
Right. And who knows what peptides will be looked at, how they'll be looked at.
Exactly right. In 30 years now. 10, 20 years from now.
No idea.
Yeah.
But things changed in 1990. Prior to that, in the 80s, the steroid available product line, it was all FDA approved drugs. It was all, just diverted testosterone or nandrolone or whatever but it was all, quality made FDA approved products. And it was only after the 1990 Steroid Control Act went into effect that suddenly the legitimate sources dried up. Suddenly, Big Pharma wasn't as interested in making the products, and doctors weren't interested in prescribing the products, and pharmacies weren't interested in carrying the products. And basic law of economics is, if you've got a demand, there's going to be a supply, right? And so if the supply is not a legitimate supply, what happens? Well, then a black market appears. And so the black market exploded in the 1990s because there was almost no legitimate product available then. And so the products became Mexican testosterone or nandrolone products, or with pictures of animals on them, because it was easier to claim that they were for veterinary use to get certain products into the U.S. But of course, they were made for people. And so you also had finished products out of Thailand. So you had Thai Anabol tablets, which were little pink 5-sided tablets with, basically the equivalent of Dianabol in them, called Anabol. And so you had all these finished products coming from outside the United States and probably outside Australia, coming into Australia the same way that they were coming into the United States at that time. And then the government started cracking down in the U.S. on the finished products coming into the United States. And so, well, if the finished products are getting flagged at the airports and they're not coming through, well, then we're going to have to try something different. And so that's when raw powders from China became the prevalent available steroid. And so somebody would order, a kilo of raw testosterone or nandrolone or trenbolone from some, Chinese source. It would be labeled as creatine or something innocuous. And if it made it through the customs screening, it would come to the home of a remailer whose house was clean and who could have some level of plausible deniability. I don't know what that is, right? And if it makes it through, then he would then give it over to the cook, who would actually esterify the product. You mix it with oil and put it in a vial and label it with a homebrew label as an underground lab, and then sell it on social media, and that's really kind of where we are now. And I represent a lot of people in that space. And I can tell you that some of these underground lab chemists are very meticulous about quality control and about making sure that the products are not contaminated. But some of them are not. Yeah. And some of them are very slipshod. And, you think about, well, somebody's injecting that product, that oil. I saw the conditions under which it was made. I've seen the video from the search warrant execution, et cetera. And I'm like, I don't think that was a very good idea. So we've actually increased the potential risks and health and dangers by cracking down on the legitimate sources. And I think we should have learned that from prohibition of alcohol in the United States in 1920, when we didn't like people drinking, or somebody didn't like the people drinking, and the government decided, okay, we're going to make it illegal. And so alcohol was criminalized, and so the legitimate sources were gone, but a black market arose. And so we had Al Capone and organized crime and people making gin in their bathtubs and people dying and getting sick from all of the problems of substandard quality, which is what happens in prohibition. And we kind of did the same thing in the war on drugs with recreational drugs by, cracking down on certain drugs. We increased many of the harms and drove more underground, and a lot of people now recognize we probably, especially in the United States, and I think Australia was pretty aggressive in its approach as well. Whereas, other countries were not quite as draconian in how they approached it. Some countries in Europe approached it more as a public health issue than as a let's throw people in jail issue. But yeah, the Steroid Control Act, which was then amended twice after that, but it did a lot of harm, to whatever good it may have done. I'm not sure it didn't do more harm.
What about the taboo of steroids? Because I remember, in the 80s and 90s, I mean, that was the last thing we even wanted to ask a bodybuilder or ask an athlete, because we kind of saw the hard work. We kind of understood their talent or what they were capable of. And looking back, like when you look at things, I'll give you an example, like Sean Ray getting done for, performing in drug steroids during the Arnold, I think it was an Arnold Classic. I think he won it. They tested him, and in the end, they took the title away and didn't get his prize money. And to me, back then, we all looked at it like, oh my God, Sean Ray was a cheat. And even, what was his name, the cyclist in America?
Lance Armstrong.
Lance Armstrong, right? It's like, and I apologize out there what I'm going to say next, it's like catching out a girl who's got fake boobs in a bikini contest and everyone's got fake boobs, but you just catch her out. Like, that's what I mean. How did, Sean, got ridiculed, and people get ridiculed when the sport itself becomes kind of rife in it. And that's changed a little bit now, but yeah, how do you navigate that?
Well, I think that the media and the anti-doping establishment have always tried to reinforce this message that steroid use is a cheating shortcut, that it's a shortcut that, is an ethical violation. And if you're competing in a sport, whether you're Lance Armstrong or anybody else, and you're told you can't do X, Y, and Z, there's certain things you can't take, and, you go and take them, even if everybody else is taking them, you are breaking the rule of the sport.
You are breaking the rule. There's no denying that, yes.
There's an ethical component there, right? But to say that specifically that the use of performance enhancing drugs is a shortcut, I'm not sure that that's really true. And I think most of us have realized now that it's not magic, right? You don't take a pill or a shot and suddenly, you're beating the 100-meter, record. It takes enormous amounts of time and work. And I think a lot of people now recognize that steroids are probably more important because of the recovery aspect. So you can train, what would have needed 5 days or 6 days of rest, you can now train twice a week, that body part twice a week or 3 times a week, harder than you would have been able to train otherwise. So you're able to recover after an even more brutal, add more sets, add more weight. And so arguably steroids are a means of actually making it harder, on yourself, of making yourself able to train and meet even, more demands. So not sure I really buy the argument about the shortcut. Maybe if a kid is 17 years old, and saying, hey, I'm just going to take steroids, I think there's very few seasoned bodybuilders or gym rats or who would condone teen steroid use. Almost everybody I know is like, this is if this is an option, this should be something that is for mature adults who are informed properly and are willing to take certain risks, because every drug has side effects. And to say that steroids don't is, so we've got kind of, bullshit on both sides, right? On the one side, you've got some, not many, but some meatheads are like, steroids are, it's all bullshit. They're great, and there's no side effects. That's insane, right? On the other hand, you've got the anti-doping people who are like, take one tablet of Dianabol and your liver falls out and you'll be dead. And well, that's a nonsense as well. The truth is somewhere in between, and the devil is in the dose very often, right? It's like anything else. The difference between a medicine and a poison is the dose.
It's the abuse.
Yeah, if you want to drink a glass of wine at night with your dinner, yeah, maybe there's some equivocal research on that. Maybe it's not great for you, but it's probably a somewhat limited risk.
Yeah.
If you want to drink a bottle of scotch a night, you're going to get very sick, over a period of months or years. So, and the more is better mentality has always been what really is attached to, the worst effects of steroids in, recreational athletes. So I think that, we allow people to take risks with their bodies and do things that are probably not good for them, right? So, we don't stop somebody from eating a fast food meal 3 times a day, 5 times a day, 10 times a day until they eat themselves into morbid obesity and type 2 diabetes. Nobody, the government is not going to arrest that person for that. The government's not going to arrest me for skydiving. The government's not going to arrest, somebody for drinking alcohol to excess. The realities. We allow people to take risks. Why? Because I think that there is a value, and we recognize a value in personal autonomy. It's my body. It's my choice. If I'm making an informed decision, I recognize what the risks are, but I want to eat poorly, and I don't want to exercise, and I want to take these crazy risks with my body and my health. Look. You mentioned breast implants before. People have died from botched breast augmentation surgeries. Women have passed, there's been all sorts of complications. People have gotten infections. There's risks involved in any cosmetic surgery procedure.
A lot of women are taking out their breasts these days because of it actually affects their mental.
Exactly.
I think there's I don't know if there's a poison or something going on, but it's affecting them. So some have to take them out now, I'm hearing.
I've heard that, and people have died from botched liposuctions. They've died on the table. So, to say that there's no risk, but we allow that, and we allow it purely for vanity, right? I mean, there's, and we wouldn't even think about is in some way condemning a woman for making the choice for breast augmentation.
Yeah.
It should be, look, if that's what makes you feel better and you feel more confident and more attractive and feel better about yourself, what's wrong with that? As long as you understand you're taking certain risks, things can go badly. There should be robust, informed consent, and then a mature adult should be able to make up their mind. But yet when it comes to steroids, if you went into your doctor's office and you said, listen, doc, I would feel better about how I look and I'd feel more confident if you prescribed me a cycle of testosterone and DECA so that I could put on a little weight, maybe get a 6-pack, put some bicep mass on, broaden my shoulders. A doctor in Australia or a doctor in the United States would say, I'm going to jail if I do that. Get out of my office. What I can do is I can put bicep implants and shoulder implants and chest prostheses, subjecting you to the risks of anesthesia, of infection, of bad results. That I can do, but I can't prescribe a moderate course of anabolic steroids. And I question whether there's logic to that. And I question whether that's something that we might not want to rethink in some ways.
Then what is it about doctors? I mean, without, again, Rick, no offense taken to anyone, but what I've come to realize is you can be academically smart because you're great at remembering text. You're just good at reciting text. And sometimes common sense doesn't come into practice. People just, and also, and I find with some lawyers as well and doctors and some of the professions.
Present company included or
no,
accepted?
excluded. I didn't know I have to say that. But I'm glad you did. No, but that's why I'm enjoying this conversation with you. Sometimes they even take away just not common sense in caring, understanding, and hearing the logic of another person and not deeming it just textbook. I mean, you take parenting. Imagine if we all just acted like the same parents. I mean, what would our kids be like? What would we be like? I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, sometimes certain practices creates suppression and creates misery and creates a problem and problems arising when you need to work with people and work the room and also understand the passion or understanding where this person's going. And I think the way doctors are today, I mean, firstly, as you know, doctors, to fucking get your testosterone checked and checked accordingly is literally like pulling teeth out. They just want to know what your iron is, your cholesterol is, whatever it is they want to know. Besides, sometimes cholesterol is a good thing for you as well. They're just not helping you. And it's a service where you can go in and ask questions, but you actually start to find out. And I think through bodybuilding, and sometimes bodybuilders become very educated because they study it. They want to find out a little bit more. They know the risks, but they want to go that little bit next level by talking to a professional. And you walk in these rooms and you talk to doctors that don't even want to research it themselves. They don't want to understand it. And secondly, when you look at them, they're no prize example themselves.
Right, exactly. Yes, I was thinking that too. And I can think of a few myself. But, I think part of the problem is doctors are largely trained to prescribe drugs, right? They're kind of...
So they're working for the pharmaceutical guy. They're working for pharma, right?
Yeah, I think so. Here in the United States, most doctors don't have any training in nutrition or diet. They're so outdated with their understanding of what people should eat. I've asked my doctor friends, what do you learn about anabolic steroids in medicine, in medical school? What do you know about that? Yeah. And it's just maybe an afternoon that they're taught, how to identify someone who's using anabolic steroids to stop them from doing that. And even with testosterone, the endocrinologists, who you'd think would be those who would know the most about anabolic steroids and testosterone, really don't know that much. I think they deal mostly with thyroid and diabetes and insulin and maybe estrogen, but they really don't know that much about men's health or testosterone. Urologists maybe know a little bit more, but it's not what bros in the gyms would expect. And very often the bros know more than the doctors, and that's the problem, And I wrote an article a few years ago for Muscular Development called "Bro Science Was Right All Along," and it was the idea that when you really think about what bodybuilders have been saying for all these years. So years ago, bodybuilders said resistance training is important, as important or maybe more important than cardio. And that was absolutely, heresy to the mainstream people, the mainstream media, the so-called experts at the time. And of course, now all these years later, what we see, the research confirms, having that muscle, which is only built through resistance training. Resistance training is actually even good for your heart. Resistance training is really probably more important than cardio, but at least as important as cardio, and really probably more correlated to how healthy you are as you age. So the bros were right about resistance training. The bros were also right about carbs and fat, because Vince Gironda, and that may be a name you remember from years ago, and others, Mauro Di Pasquale, were all kind of, embracing the idea of fat in the diet. And there was a period of time in the United States, and I would imagine that it was similar in Australia, where everything was low fat. Low fat was the way to go. Don't eat the fat, And so what were low fat products? They were just filled with sugar. It was replacing the fat with sugar. There were just as many calories or more. People started eating junk food, and as long as it said low fat or no fat, they just eat all these calories. But bodybuilders never really bought into that. We always knew that protein centric and healthy fats were important. Here in the United States, there was a period of time for many years that the Food and Drug Administration defined healthy, the term healthy, in a way that excluded a handful of almonds, an avocado, or a piece of broiled salmon. Those things were not healthy according to our government's view, because they were too high in the ratio of calories from fat. And they've changed that now, finally. It's absurd that it was that way for so long. But the bros were right about fat in the diet. The bros were also right about protein in the diet. And there was a period of time, how long did we read articles saying protein will kill your kidneys? Too much protein will, it's horrible. And bodybuilders knew that was a bunch of crap. We knew that 40 years ago. And, now, of course, we now see protein in almost everything, and every soccer mom and golf dad is taking protein drinks or increasing the protein in their diet. So they were right about that. So, bros were right about so much, and bros obviously, were right about, I think, testosterone and the importance of testosterone for men. And bros may have overdone it and maybe gone into super physiologic ranges, but the idea that testosterone was a bad thing, which really the mainstream media has, and to some degree still is sort of anti-testosterone. The articles are still kind of trying to maybe it's because of the link to masculinity or hypermuscularity. For whatever it is, testosterone is still demonized by the media, but bodybuilders were never afraid of it. The bros knew that this was something for men that was healthy. So I think bro science really had so many things right, and the medical community and even the mainstream dietetics community had lots and lots of stuff wrong.
Yeah. I don't think steroids won anyone the Olympia. The guys that have won the Olympia are genetic freaks. So in other words, they're Ronnie Coleman is Ronnie Coleman for a reason. Like, you know what I mean? Or Phil Heath. I mean, sure, we know what can help them, but their physiques, there's probably guys that could win the Olympia that have never competed, but they'll never know their genetics abilities because they've never got on stage. So you can take as much as you like, increase your doses. It does not make you become the world's best bodybuilder, because unfortunately you're just not gifted with what that sport needs. It's like sprinters as well. You can do what you want, but at the end of the day, there's a gift that you've been given that you fortunately found that you could do, because there are people that are probably sitting on the couch at home, not going to a gym, that didn't realize they are genetically muscular gifted and they could go and train and probably have something quite unique and quite special. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's such a, to have bicep shape that is, up to standards to compete with a Ronnie Coleman, to have calves, you could have everything but calves. You could have everything but, triceps. You get everything but lower lats. You need everything to be at the top. And that's all genetics. Then you need the capacity to train hard to develop every one of those muscles 100%. To its maximum.
Which is food.
And then you need then you've got to do the diet gig. And there are some guys who had many of those gifts, but just could never get lean enough. They could never get quite hard enough. Here's a name from the past, that Matt Mendenhall.
Right.
Matt Mendenhall was a high-ranking amateur bodybuilder. Don't think he ever got a pro card. But the physique, the genetic gifts were absolutely incredible. Shoulders as wide as a doorway, phenomenal calves. Every body part was there, but he was never able to get lean enough to crack up to that next level. So there's so many factors in it. I admire the folks who, having, I remember, dieting down for shows, and, it's not fun. And, it takes discipline, it takes sacrifice. And so I respect it. I actually sponsor a lot of bodybuilding shows here in the U.S. I've sponsored the Arnold Amateur competition many years. I've sponsored many of the Bev's, Steve Weinberger's shows, including the New York Pro, but mostly amateur shows, because I love sort of giving back and sponsoring and helping, so that there's going to be something to aspire to for the younger bodybuilders, the ones who are just starting out. And I've gotten the opportunity to give out trophies to some friends, including some mature bodybuilders, who are in the masters divisions, and I respect that tremendously, because to get up and compete in a masters competition, to do all the sacrifice that's necessary for that takes a rare breed.
I want to talk about amateur, but I just want to say, I was at a wedding on the weekend, and I was talking to some, kids in their 20s, and I was talking to a girl and her partner as well. And obviously I'm talking about bodybuilding only because I know, with my podcast. And I said, you never know your body until you go into a cut. Everyone can bulk. Bulking's easy. But you actually discover, I think everyone, if you really want to know what your body is about and how muscular you really are and what you can take, and it doesn't necessarily mean the stage, but go for a cut. Try to lean down and see exactly what you do have, because that's where it's all going to be revealed, your hard work. And because a bulk is easy. So I kind of said, there's one time you're going to have to do a cut to see what you've got. Until then, you never know what you've got. And
makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Don't you think? Like bulking's easy. Do a cut.
Yeah, some people are afraid to lose the bulk. Oh, I'll fade away, but you always get that back. Do the cut and then and see how it all looks. It's
you'd be quite surprised. You'd be quite surprised. Yeah. What do you think about, because you mentioned about amateurs? God, I want to ask you so many things. I hope I get it all in. With the amateur league, why are people so fixated on getting pro cards when the amateur league is just as pristine and especially can be lucrative in trophies and prize money, not to the pro level. You can still have a career in it. But the fact is that I know here in Australia, so many people exhausted the amateur league because pro card was so hard. And the early days in America was the same. And there was a certain pristine of knowing you're the top 3, top 2, top 1. Sponsors wanted to know you. Like you said, you want to go on stage and hand a trophy to somebody. But it seems like everyone's trying to jump into pro level. And then they're talking about they're not ready for pro, even though they've got a pro card.
Right.
And they're coming 28th. Right. They're coming 18th, and no one knows who's 18th. And they're beautiful bodybuilders. They've got amazing bodies. And
it's just too much competition.
Competition. And don't you and I know I love business. I'm sure you love business and you see the investment. But what happened? why is pro cards, and I'm not talking about pro cards just in the IFBB, I'm talking about even in a natural game, everybody's trying to lock down a subscription. Everyone's trying to get registrations, and suddenly everybody's got a pro card in every single federation, may it be natural or pro, but there's no pro competitions. It's gone.
Right. Yeah.
It's like cattle.
Yeah,
it's like cattle coming through. It's like the cattle.
Yeah. I think it's just the mental, psychological badge of honor. Hey, I'm a pro. And it's like I've got this badge of honor that I've got my pro card, without really thinking, okay, well, now what am I going to do with that? You know, where do I go? What are my options going to be from there? Yeah, that's the problem with, I think not thinking forward to the next step.
Yeah, because I think to myself, pro, where I see, and they don't even write their words, but they don't need to. They just use their name: Kevin Levrone, Kai Green, just Milosh, the whole lineups of the top 10, always every decade. To me, they're pros. I just see them as pros. You know what I mean? But it's now I read pro, I go, what? You're a pro? Pro in what? And then you find out it's, without men's physique, which is not, I get it, that's okay, but we're not talking about the elite levels, the Olympia levels. We're talking about just general wearing board shorts. And I'm just going to myself, you know what I mean? Like, so I don't know. I just think.
Well, we've got more and more divisions now, right? So we've got everything from wellness to physique to, bikini to fit model to, there's an ever increasing number of categories for divisions for every body type, right? So, so you've got, some of the shows that I've been to, it's a full day event. There's just so many athletes competing that, it seems like there's no end to divisions.
And what do you think of the number of pro cards being handed out? And do you think that, is it good for the sport? And is it good to have this many federations? It's a great business model, I guess, maybe. But do you think we're becoming more pageantry? And it's taking a long time out of your day? Like, I don't know, like, is it, does it need some culling to create the excitement for the next division? Or is it like, again, I haven't been on stage and I applaud them on stage. I do. I'm happy you got the guts and I love it and I'm going to get out of your way. But sometimes I'm thinking, is there really like a lineup of 10 going 5 deep and we're going to be there for the next hour and a half? And I think to myself, does everybody?
A long day.
It's a long day.
Yeah. You brought up something that's interesting. Is it pageantry? You know, and there are folks who will, I remember Ben Weider. I had many conversations with Ben Weider, and he was committed to trying to get bodybuilding into the Olympics as a sport, as an Olympic sport. And it never, obviously it never happened. It was resisted. And I think the idea was that it's more pageant than sport, because the training all occurs off site, off stage. No one sees it, and it's just now displaying the work of art, so to speak. And bodybuilding is artistry. There's an artistic component to it without question. And there is a pageantry component to it. Although you could argue that, I suppose, figure skating or other things like that are somewhat subjective in terms of who's the best at something. But at least the thing that you're watching there is the activity they've practiced. Whereas in bodybuilding, the thing that they've done is not what they do on the stage. And that's what I think why it never really took off as an Olympic sport. As much as I have always loved watching it, but it is a different animal.
Maybe then, for it to be an Olympic sport, Rick, then it's got to be the posing. Because if we're watching a dance, which is figure skating, if we're watching breakdancing, which I think Australia destroyed any chance of it happening again in the Olympics, I think that then maybe if we're not on stage lifting, doing barbell curls, doing bench press, squats, maybe that they should have it where your muscularity is subject to your posing, and the Olympic sport is the posing part of it. So meaning you have to come in with the physique, but your elegancy, the music, the entrenching the crowd or the judges into your routine, maybe that can be an Olympic sport.
Yeah, it's a performance, right?
Yeah.
It would be, an artistic performance above everything else, combined with the physique. Well, before we run out of time, I did want to talk about a few of those other things that we had on the little list.
Yes.
I think we had talked about the enhanced games.
Yes, the enhanced games, please.
We had, maybe peptides, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I do. And
where we're going with testosterone replacement therapy.
Please do.
Any or all of that. Whatever strikes your fancy, because I know that I get a lot of questions about that stuff. So I'll get questions about peptides and, what to make of these peptides here in the United States. Many of these peptides are not approved by the Food and Drug Administration. Yeah. And so the media is very, very negative on it, although I speak to doctors and practitioners involved with peptides who say wonderful things about them. And probably, half of the people in your gym are probably taking some peptide or another, BPC 157,
GLP-1, GLP-2.
Yeah. So
tell us about peptides. Tell us the story with peptides and legalities and things like that.
Yeah, so I think we're right now certainly in the United States where things are moving in two different directions. You may know that our Health and Human Services Administrator, RFK Jr.
How do you feel about him?
So he's a huge fan of peptides and has been vocal about it. And, he's trying, I think, to open the door to a freer, legitimate supply of peptides through doctors and legitimate means. At the other side of things here in the United States are at the state level. And so Alabama just came up with an idea that doctors who prescribe peptides, unapproved peptides to people in that state are violating Alabama's pharmacy laws. And so there's this crackdown on peptides. I deal a lot with peptides sold for research purposes only. So you can go online and just do a little Googling, and you'll find that there are websites where people are selling peptides with the understanding it's not for human use. Well, the government, at least here in the United States, has cracked down on a lot of those websites under their theory that the sellers know that the buyers are using them, and that's what the whole transaction is for. It's selling stuff for human use under the wink guise that it's not for human use, and that's fraud on the Food and Drug Administration, who would otherwise regulate this transaction. Is it GMP compliant? Is there a pharmacist, et cetera? And so you're bypassing all of that. And so I'm representing a number of companies in criminal cases like that. And so that's, something that anybody who's selling peptides for research purposes, I'm happy to have a conversation with you for a risk assessment, because you do need to assess the risks in doing that. In terms of whether consumers should be using MOTS-C or the copper peptide or BPC, look, you probably know as well as I do, there are guys in gyms all over who are like, my shoulder was killing me. I used BPC I'm training again.
Yeah.
My hamstring was torn. I used the Wolverine stack, and my doctor can't believe that I'm back to training again. And there's a lot of anecdotal, very positive anecdotal reports, but there's not a lot of safety and efficacy data from human clinical trials. And so in order for something to be sold as a drug, got to go through phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials. That hasn't happened with a lot of these peptides. So there is an element of risk that is something that people need to be aware of. And some of the claims may or may not be founded by solid data and more founded by, anecdotal information. I tend to skew libertarian on most things. I think that people should be able to access things that they want for their own bodies, as long as they are fully informed and accurately informed of the risks and the benefits. If there's false claims that are being made, this will do something, and there's really not evidence of that I have a problem with. But as long as you're fully advised, I think that people should have the right to make up their own mind, and that the government should facilitate through its policies a world, a country in which people, mature adults, I'm not talking about kids, none of these conversations is about kids. And this is all my personal views. And I always say in every podcast that I do, Stephen, that nothing I say is to be construed as legal advice or to create an attorney-client relationship just by viewing this, that, this is for information purposes only. And a lot of these views are my own personal views. But I do believe that even with respect to testosterone replacement therapy, look, as long as mature adults are properly advised of all of the risks, and we're talking about knowledgeable doctors and quality products, I think there's huge benefits for men, particularly of a certain age, if their hormone levels are low. I think we should, embrace the idea of testosterone replacement therapy in appropriate candidates, and not try to reduce it or attack it, which the mainstream media constantly does.
Why? What's stopping it? Is it the trials? Is it pharma? Is it something they feel? Yeah. Who's stopped? Why?
It's hard to say. I think that testosterone has always been demonized just as an idea, whether it is the pharmaceutical aspect or the metaphorical aspect. Testosterone has been linked to something that's poisonous since Alan Alda, the star of MASH in the 1970s, coined the phrase testosterone poisoning and attributed all of the bad things that happen in the world that men are involved with as resulting from too much testosterone. And that testosterone being the whipping boy for the things that are wrong in the world, I think to some degree paved the way for the kind of negative demonization of it. Testosterone is also linked to just sort of masculinity. And I think we live in a culture where traditional masculinity has been devalued and in many ways, demonized. The American Psychological Association came out with a position in 2019 that traditional masculinity is a harmful thing to both boys and men. And so you're dealing with a society that is valuing the feminine and, just attacking and dispelling the value of masculinity, and testosterone is a victim of that. I think there's also testosterone is linked to power and dominance, and those are seen as very bad things in a more feminized society as well. And I think people are scared of big, strong men, and so there's that as well.
Well, who's scared? But I think I said this a few years back. I think the war is against males. There's a war against male. There's a war against testosterone. And the only reason there is that is because the male can lift the shield. The male can lift the sword. The male is the one that will create a revolution or stand up in relation to tyranny. And if you can eliminate that out of society, it just lets a weaker society come in to weaken us further. And I think that's the secret recipe that no one can mimic or copy, and what God gave us. And something you wrote here, if I can just recite it, I think to some degree, the empowerment of women in recent decades has been at the expense of men. But there needed to be better parity in employment and society in general. There needed to be. Things need to even out, and that's a good thing. It's just as important to remember that strong women shouldn't make men feel like they have to be weak. We all need to be strong in these tough times, and masculinity is a good thing.
Yeah, 100%. And, certainly there's that masculine aspect that, is maybe why testosterone is demonized. But the other part of it too is big pharma. So testosterone has been off patent, for so many, many years. There's really not a lot of money to be made from testosterone. And so in some ways, maybe having higher testosterone levels would alleviate certain symptoms that much more profitable drugs are being used for. And so there's certainly that.
Antidepressants. Yes.
So I think that there's not a lot of money to be made from it. And so pharma doesn't care that much about it. Obviously, the GLP drugs, that's where the money is, right? You got a patented drug. And so if you can get everybody on a GLP, then there's a lot of money to be made there. There's not a lot of money in testosterone. The only way you're really going to make money if you're big pharma out of testosterone is by coming up with some patentable route of administration that is new and novel. So if you could come up with a nose spray or some sort of something, stick it in your ear or some crazy way of getting it into the body, and you patent that administration method, that's where you're going to make money. But the testosterone itself, it's off patent. There's not really much that's going to happen with it.
I think you've given them. How can they not come up with ideas? I'm gobsmacked. How can they not come up with ideas? So what do you think about these enhanced games? Apparently they've shown enhanced ain't enhanced.
Yeah. So it's funny, the reaction to it. The anti-doping, the IOC, the Olympics, and the anti-doping, orthodoxy are, super down on it. Obviously, they're very threatened by it, and very against it. And I could understand, some of their arguments. On the other hand, the enhanced games will argue that why not see what the human body can do and allow people to enhance themselves in a controlled way and see what happens, as long as the athletes are fully advised of the risks. The way it's all played out, though, is it wasn't overly impressive.
No.
When you look at the records, it was kind of a big nothing burger, right? We thought that you'd have all of these records falling, and these geared, juiced up athletes would just be, completely overtaking the past. That didn't happen, maybe in part because it wasn't really a free-for-all. The only FDA-approved pharmaceutical products were used. The doses were being medically monitored. So you didn't have the real what could have been just a crazy free-for-all didn't happen. But I think this also reinforces what you said earlier, and that is genetics and natural abilities are such a huge factor. The drugs, they add something to it, but it's really not all about the drugs. One of the issues that I think comes out of the enhanced games, though, is this issue of whether it was really a fair way of trying to come up with breaking records for its own sake, or whether it was trying to in some way support a profitable line of products for ordinary people to use, because there's attached to it is a wellness component for everyday people to try to use to be prescribed the same things that the athletes were. I think it would have done better if the athletes were amazing and maybe everybody would have wanted to partake, but I think it was somewhat disappointing, and I'm not sure where it really goes from here.
So I want to, you've probably noticed again, if we haven't covered something, let me know, Rick, because I'm, obviously asking things of what I'm discovering. You've seen it online, if it's illegal, but the way they're talking, it's like it's an everyday thing. But people educating people on steroids, what their cycle is, how much they take, or what a good cycle is, even needles now. They're talking about the size of needle, where they're injecting, in the shoulder, in your backside. Are they running the risk of being sued?
So in this country, everybody runs the risk of being sued because there's no bar to entry, right?
Okay.
So,
but still, is it dangerous?
Yeah,
but is it dangerous what they're doing or not?
So
People
certainly
be listening to this.
There could be dangers if people are listening to bad advice, right? So there's nothing to stop a self-proclaimed nutrition expert from going online and recommending that everybody eat a diet consisting of nothing but sawdust.
Right.
And so, they could do that. And what would happen? Well, if somebody followed that advice, they'd probably get sick at some point. And would they then blame that guru for the advice that was given? Probably. And a lawsuit would follow. And there would be a determination by a court of whether the advice was so irresponsible and violated a duty of care to the person who was a follower and listening. That same thing would apply to other types of nutritional advice, to drug advice, to PED advice. So if you're giving advice and somebody follows it, there is the possibility that that person would sue for following it. I think it's an even more likely situation when it really is a one-on-one coaching situation. So you're the coach and somebody else is the competitor, and the coach is giving either advice about here's the drugs you need to take and in these doses, and here's the diuretics you should be taking, and here's when you should take your insulin, and now the athlete does get hurt or gets sick or dies. And now the family says, well, you were the one responsible for his drug stack, and you were the one who was telling him what to do. And, he took all this insulin and he died. And so that, I think, is an even more difficult situation. I have gotten calls from coaches, performance coaches, who've wanted to talk to me about risk and liability and what sort of waivers and what sort of informed consents and, how can I protect myself from the athlete who makes the athlete's choice. And no one's putting a gun to the athlete's head to follow this advice. You're making this choice that you want to get to the top and you want to use certain pharmacology in order to enhance your performance or your appearance, depending on whatever sport it is. And if things go wrong, don't blame me becomes what some of the coaches want to try to draft and say. But again, anybody can sue anybody, and so ultimately these could be decisions that judges or juries need to rule on at the end of the day.
You've before we close off, because I've got a few more questions here. I don't believe that any specific individual wants to intentionally make or keep people sick, although bad policies can have that effect. I do believe that behind all institution policies are socioeconomic equations. Although it may be presented quite differently, money and power drive policy. How is America today with that? Because we have seen, I think, some of the worst things come through the last decade, especially the last few decades with our food periodical table and whatever they had put together that was making everybody sick, I believe. Overweight, probably affecting them mentally, and the prescription of antidepressants the way it is, and also what happened in COVID. I mean, this has been an interesting time, and I believe probably when we're not around, they'll be talking about these times and society. And how can people put together things that predominantly harm us, especially the periodical table, the food table we had, and things like that? How does this happen?
So yeah, I mean,
how did we become such an economy, which we are, but to that extent, like, are we such mules in this game? Like, is it? Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No. Well, just one small piece of that would be, why were we told for some period of time that we needed to eat 6 to 11 servings of grain a day? That was put on the pyramid. Why? Do we really need 6 to 11 servings of grain a day? Do we need all that carbohydrate, bread and pasta, or what about protein? What about eggs? What about meat? What about fish? That was all downsized on the food pyramid. It was all about those grains. And when you said before, talked about money, and that policy is driven by financial interests. Yeah, well, 6 to 11 servings of grain a day are great for farmers. It's great for those who have lobbied those who draft such policies to be able to sell a lot of grain and to get lots of grain into the hands of consumers. Was it good for the consumers? No. When you really look back at our epidemic of obesity, it was in large measure based on bad advice that was coming from the top. And to kind of circle to the other things that you were saying, I think that over the last 5 years, a large percentage of folks in the United States have come to question the government and the so-called experts on the advice that's given. And that's not necessarily always a good thing, because, it's almost like in the bodybuilding field, when the experts many, many years ago in the 80s came out with the statement that steroids don't work. Steroids don't work. They were lying. They were rigging studies that were ridiculous. They were using such small doses that obviously there was no change in the subjects. And bodybuilders and gym rats knew they were lying. Everybody knew they were lying. And so when they started saying, well, there's bad side effects that can come from steroids, well, that is true, but nobody believed it then, because you lied about something and you destroyed your own credibility. And the medical community destroyed its credibility on performance enhancing drugs. And a lot of what happened a few years ago really hurt the credibility of the medical establishment, of the government. And so there's now a larger percentage of people who distrust the ordinary sources, including the mainstream media that was part of this charade. And so, you now, and I think that's why you see the popularity of peptides to a degree. I don't think that would have happened 10 or 15 years ago. But now when people hear, well, these peptides are not FDA approved, that would have been a death knell 10 years ago, where people would have said, oh, well, if they're not FDA approved, no, I don't want to use those. But now people say, they're not FDA approved. That means they're probably working. That means that they probably have some benefits.
We need testosterone now in our world. Yes, now everything suddenly comes to the surface.
Right. So I think that we've, and it's a sad thing that, half of the country here in the U.S. at least has really a very different view of what the orthodox establishment of health voices have to say, and really have discounted it. And that's a change that I think is only over the last few years, and is largely tied to some degree of misinformation that was put out there as if it were true.
Without getting too political, and I'm going to leave it and then just finish off with asking about what comps you've done and a few other little things you're doing at the moment. But how do you feel about America now? How do you feel about Trump? He's about a year and a bit in office now. Kennedy there, and just everything going on. I mean, there's been a bit of turbulence here and there, but I think Australia, some of us realised, there was a few years America was just getting it wrong. Well, that's how we felt, or some of us felt. And that would cause effect on us. And we knew we just needed stronger policies, or we needed something. Well, I guess we just needed America to stand up a little bit better. How are you finding America? Are we in good hands at the moment?
So I think we're a very divided country at this point. I'm in New York, which is certainly a blue state, and we have a very divided country politically at this point. And I have a lot of friends in the South. I have a lot of friends in California. I have a lot of friends, and some of my friends, have very extreme views in one direction or another. I was able to write a column for Muscular Development magazine for 25 years, and I was able to comment on the political decision-making, on policies, on politics. And I think at the end of the day, I was able to do it in a way that most people recognized that I'm a libertarian, and that I believe in freedom above all, that I believe in free speech above all. And there was a period of time where I think there was a very unfortunate cracking down on free speech, including policing of social media that was very, very destructive and harmful. But I think the people who read my column, I think the far right folks who read my column were like, Rick's a far right conservative, let's face it. But I also think the far left people who read my column would say, Rick's a liberal. Rick's he's one of us. And so I've refrained from ever getting too political or making too much of a political statement. Although I think if you read between the lines of all the things that I've written for the past 25 years, it should be pretty obvious where my feelings are. But I would like to see somehow my country come together in a more patriotic way. That, I look back at, hey, I was in New York on September 11th. I had been in the city on September 10th. I just happened not to be in there on the day the towers were hit. and I have friends who were there. I have friends who lost family members and friends that day. I was in New York in the days that followed September 11th. I saw people wearing gas masks and, walking the men in suits with gas masks. I didn't wear anything. I breathed like everybody else. Knock on wood. I have no medical issues as a result of it. But I saw in the aftermath a patriotism and a love of country and a solidarity that I've never really seen since. And it's so unfortunate that sometimes it takes a catastrophe. It shouldn't have to take that kind of a thing to make people realize that we're all the human race. We're all in this together. And we need to find ways to get along and to make our country better each and every day. And I've tried to be part of that process as much as I can. And I don't think my belief is that people who should be in politics sometimes don't go into politics because it's such a dirty game. And I've seen the way it works. And, it's very hard sometimes to become political and keep your integrity. It's hard. It happens, but it's very difficult because there's so much money in politics here in the United States. In order to run, even to get to the primary, you need to amass such a war chest to be able to frighten off your other primary opponents. And where does that money come from? Some politicians will try to get, $5 here and $5 there, but that's a hard approach. You really need to go to sources of funding from people who have interests that are not necessarily consistent with the public good, whether it's the pharmaceutical lobby, big food, whatever it is, to be able to accept money from those who are saying, here's how we feel about this issue, and we want to know if you'll be an ally and work with us on this. And you probably know that may not be the best thing for the constituents. It may be good for the special interest, but not for the public. And so you're put in that position. And my fear would be that at some point, many politicians, I won't say most, but many are forced to sort of sell out little by little what they believed in when they started in order to be able to stay in office to do good things. And at some point, maybe the good things you're trying to do become outweighed by the money you took in order to stay in office. And so, I'm a little bit jaded on it. I hope for better things, but for now, I'm loving what I do. So I'm going to continue to represent people who make some bad decisions, sometimes mistakes, sometimes just bad decisions. And most of my clients have no prior criminal record. I generally don't represent people who physically, economically, or sexually harm other people. They're people who maybe they're selling peptides online. Maybe they're an underground lab selling steroids. Maybe they're, doing something in the fitness thing, in the fitness world that the government doesn't like. But I love what I do. I love my clients, and I'm actually doing a little more. I'm beginning to get back into the acting at this advanced stage. Last year I was asked to do a little part in a movie called Stray Hunter, based on a game, the Okamiverse Chronicles, it's called. And so I did a little cameo, a small role in that. I had a monologue. It was great. And I've been doing I've been looking for a few other things, a few other projects in that regard. And so if you follow me on Instagram at Rick Collins ESQ, I'll keep people posted about what I'm doing in the film world. If something the next project that comes through. But I also try to keep people informed about peptides, about TRT, about bodybuilding, about changes that come around. And sometimes there are issues that come up that make you say, well, what should bodybuilders or what should the fitness community think about this or that? And I've been called the lawyer for the fit and jacked. And so I do that. And I'll end with one quick story. And that is many years ago had to be 2002 or so. I was at the Arnold Classic in Columbus, Ohio, which is a bodybuilding show that Arnold has sponsored for many, many years, always in Columbus, Ohio. And when I grew up, Arnold was on the cover of Muscle and Fitness, which was then, I think, Muscle Builder and Power was the name of the Weider magazine at that time, before Flex magazine ever came out. And so I was a huge fan of Arnold growing up. And, this was before Arnold as the star of Predator or the star of Conan or any of that. This was when he was in the late 70s and early 80s, when he was really just the Mr. Olympia and the most famous and great bodybuilder at the time. And so in 2002, I was offered the opportunity to meet him in person for the first time. And like I said before, I once, many years later, spent a whole day with him in his office above Shotzi, his restaurant on Main Street in Venice Beach. And I've met him a number of times since then. But this was the first meeting. And Stephen, I think you can tell I'm usually not lost for words. Words come fairly easily to me, but my hands were sweating. I was so nervous that I'm suddenly going to be meeting my icon. And so I'm waiting and thinking about what I'm going to say to him. And suddenly a door opens, and it's in a private little green room, personal little meeting. And suddenly he comes walking out, and he's taller than I expected him to be. And I'm 5'10" and a half, somewhere like that, but he's taller than me. And he comes walking out, and suddenly he's coming face to face with me. And it's, I can't believe it. And like many bodybuilders, for friends and whatnot, I've always done a little impression of Arnold. And so for friends and goofing around and stuff like that. And as he walks up, and the person introducing us says, "Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'd like you to meet Rick Collins." And I put my hand out, and it just, in the nervousness, it bubbles out. And I reach out and I just say, "It's super fantastic to meet you." And he looks at me and he goes, "Why do you do an impression of me?" And I'm like, yeah. He's like, it's good. And he starts laughing. I'm so happy that he wasn't offended by it or, punch me out or something. And he laughed about it. And it was, for me, it was just a wonderful experience. And I've lived the bodybuilding life all of these years, both personally in the gym and in the circles of bodybuilding. I represented Rich Gaspari's company, Leela Brada's company, Bob Cigarillo and Rich Gaspari and I had breakfast recently. Three old guys talking about medical problems and whatnot. But it's just been an amazing ride for me, and I'm so blessed and so grateful to have had the opportunity to be involved in bodybuilding for all of these years, even though I never got the pro card. I never went in that direction. I stopped competing, but I never stopped bodybuilding, and I never stopped my love of the sport. And I think that probably comes through in our interview, and I greatly appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share my story.
Well, I want you to be a personal trainer for the moment, but I've got 3 questions to ask, speed questions. 1, who's your favorite Olympian of all time? We can go as far back as you want. And as president,
I'll go with Arnold.
Arnold, I can't do the accent. Hey, Arnold.
En grote Arnold, het super fantastic. You're the bishop of your life. But I will say, from a physique standpoint, I don't think anybody's ever can match Ronnie Coleman. Ronnie in his peak was just absolutely crazy. I am a big fan. Never got the Sandow, but I'm also a fan of Flex Wheeler. He's a friend of mine, and as well. And Sean Ray was also amazing, and Victor Martinez, who was a friend of mine for many, many years. Victor had an absolutely crazy physique in his peak as well.
What is your prominent body part, your weakest body part? What's the one that just seems to explode and one that you fucking struggle with all the time?
Chest and arms, I would say. Yeah. I was once in a bodybuilding contest that actually gave awards for body parts.
Okay, yeah, that was I thing once in a time, yes.
It was. And I won best arms and best legs.
Wow.
But I wanted to develop my chest further because the guy beat me at a much bigger chest, and I think ultimately I succeeded in growing my chest more. Weakest body part, probably at maybe shoulders. I never really had the fully round caps of the delts as much as I would have liked. I think I would have liked to have worked those more. I will tell you that when I competed, I remember taking the tape measure of my waist. My waist was 27 and a half inches at the in contest shape. And I'll never forget just sort of reaching down and feeling the skin over my abs, and it felt almost like cellophane. And that's when you're dry enough and you're ready. So, yeah.
I tell you what, and how hard is it to find that day again to get your waist down? Oh my God.
Oh man, it's tough. The years are unkind.
All right, if you could choose one career and it paid you the same, gave you everything. So, lawyer, actor, or lifter, bodybuilder, whatever it is. You had to pick one.
That's a great question. Yeah.
Same money, same money, same everything. You've got same rewards, but you're only allowed to pick one for the rest of your life, or have it part of your life forever.
So from a fame perspective, I'd love to say actor, film, but I think for me, it's a simple one. It's lawyer, because I have been able to help people. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about this. I had one of those, if you look back on your legal career and you were to think of like the top 5 to 10 courtroom experiences that you've had where you've really saved a life, you've really made an incredible difference for the decades to come in a person's life. And I've been fortunate enough, you don't have them, they don't happen every day as a lawyer, right? I mean, but I can think of maybe 10 situations, the top 10 situations in my career where what I did, that my advocacy, my passion, my knowledge, unique set of skills came together in such a way that I was able to make such a dramatic change in the trajectory of somebody's life. And that happened actually last week, last Wednesday. And I remember just coming home and just thinking about and telling my family about it, my wife and my daughters, and just like, this doesn't happen every day, but it is so gratifying to do something like this for somebody else. It's great to see your face on screen, and it's great to have terrific lifts and get a new personal record, or all of that stuff. But I think we're here to serve others, and especially, I guess, maybe after my skydiving mishap, even more so. I'm attuned to the idea that we're here for a purpose. We're here to serve others, to help others. And at the end of the day, that's the stuff you're really going to remember. You're not going to remember your best bench press. You'll tell people about it for a period of time, but I'll never forget what happened in a number of cases where it really looked like all was lost and I was able to turn things around. And I'm grateful for that opportunity. And if I wasn't a lawyer, maybe if I was a physician, you'd look back and say, oh, those 10 patients that, their cancer was stage 4, and I was able to turn that around and look at him. He's healthy, and now he lived his life, and he's with his wife and family, and none of that would have happened. I've had the equivalent of that in law, and there's nothing that makes you feel better in life than that.
I love it. Well, time to be a personal trainer. We're gonna go over the body. Just give us the exercise, okay? If you wanted to grow traps, what would we do?
I'm a big shrug guy. And there's a machine at Bev's that is the shrug machine. So it's angled so that you're actually shrugging up and in as opposed to purely vertical. And I find that really develops the traps best.
Front delts.
If you can do overhead pressing, great. But you sometimes reach an age where, it's not going to happen so much, right? Your joints are arthritic and such. So heavy front raises is the way to go with it. Whether it's thumbs up or, bringing it over a little bit across the body so that you're getting front and a little bit of side delt. It also, you can also feel it kind of in the upper pec. So you're getting like a nice combination of roundness there. So that's my front delt pick.
Side delt.
So because of shoulder issues, I've been doing something a little bit differently, and I'll let guys try it out. I do my side delt raises with the dumbbells started behind my back.
Okay. Yes.
As opposed to the way everybody does it. For some reason, by starting them together behind the back and bringing them up and out, I have no shoulder pain. Whereas when I do them from the front, and I actually think it positions them in a nice way where it's really, you can't go as heavy, but it's all straight side delt, and I like it. And I think if you've got any kind of shoulder impingement issues, it's worth giving it a shot. It's kind of counterintuitive. A lot of guys will say, oh my God, I don't know how you can do that. That must be, that would hurt my shoulder.
Yeah.
Try it. It doesn't hurt mine. Rear
delts.
I like the rear delt machine. You just grab it and you do it. Big fan of rear delt machine.
Okay. Back.
So I've always been a combination, pull down and heavy row.
Yep.
I used to do very heavy, standing barbell rows. And you reach the point where, maybe you don't want all that on your lower back so much anymore.
Yep.
And so it's mostly machine rows. But I like the seated cable row, and I can go very, very heavy. There's a machine at Bev's that is instead of the V-bar, it's two separate handles with two separate stacks for seated rowing on a little bench. And I find that stretching it out, bringing it back, you can go pretty heavy, and there's really no pain. Feels great.
Love it. Chest.
So I was always a big fan, as a young man, of just benching, but I don't think the flat bench is the best exercise really for chest. I've gone that the heaviest I ever went was 160-pound dumbbells. I don't know what that translates to in kilos.
That's a lot. Probably 80
But
kilos. That's a lot.
For a lying, lying flat dumbbell. I have done 100-pound dumbbells for 37 reps in a flat dumbbell bench.
I'm lucky to lie down on that.
I'm pretty strong.
Hence the chest.
But I will say that Bev's has a variety of machines. So if you want to use machines exclusively, if you don't want to use dumbbells or barbells, you'll always have such a selection and variety of every possible angle. There's a machine we call the crazy arm machine, which is because it's plate loading, but it's cables, but it definitely forces you to control the movement in a way that really stresses the pecs. I like that a lot.
Bicep?
So, I was talking with, I reconnected with an old friend of mine named Dominic from the gym I trained at with that crazy biker Phil many years ago. And I love Phil to this day. But we would do 225-pound barbell curls, cheat curls, with 2.25, the full 2 plates on the bar. I would never even, I don't know how my arms didn't fall off then, but they didn't. I think that that built them to a large degree. But I'm a fan of preachers. I do a lot of preachers, and I also like I'll take a cable, standing facing the cable machine, slight support, and just curl in this movement.
I might try that
as a cable curl, and it's a kind of a very different angle. It's maybe similar to a concentration curl, as if you had your arm supported on your knee or something. But it basically it's a standing concentration curl.
I always like a new exercise.
So that's, you can call those Collins curls or something.
I'm going to go. Eva's going to ask me, what's that? I go, it's a Collins curl, mate. Haven't you heard of Collins curls? What about tricep?
Big fan of close grip bench. Big fan of, used to do a lot of skull crushers back in the day. And sometimes we use the platform of the assisted pull-up machine. So it's what you'll put your knees on to do assisted pull-ups, but we'll put some weight on there, and I'll put my hand in a triangle position, and I'll just push down on the platform. And it's kind of like
push-ups, a bit like close grip push-ups.
Kind of like a close grip push-up movement. Really blows up the tricep.
That's another Collins exercise that I can try. Forearms.
Yeah, I'm trying to give you stuff that's not the ordinary. There you go. So forearm, I like the cable, and I will put about 70 pounds on the cable and just do a standing arm flex facing away from the cable. Love that. Obviously, I'll do a dumbbell off a bench and things like that, but I like the cable. I feel like you can really get a full stretch back and a really full contraction. It's a great range of.
Love it. Abs, and then we're going to go lower body. We're done. Abs.
So for me, I like some of the machines for abs. At Bev's, there's a machine where you're simultaneously doing you've got the legs and the crunches, upper body. So there's a resisted crunch for both. So that's probably one of my favorites. For quads, lately I love the belted squat.
I saw it, mate. What did I see? I think I saw you have, was it 8 plates on either side? Or could it have been more?
9 plates on, 9 on each side, and it's not, the weight there.
Now it makes sense why you've got no PCL. I was going, what? I Googled that.
With no PCL, I'm able to do that. It's crazy.
Yeah, I Googled it. I go, what's wrong with his knees?
Yeah. See that? So, but I find that that's no, you reach a point where if you have any shoulder issues, it's kind of hard to get to hold the bar.
I thought about you last night. I did squats with the bar on my shoulders, but I didn't go that heavy. But I did, when I did your script, I went, I go, Rick, I've got to do it. I can't walk away from squats.
Yeah, no, you got to do it. But the belted squat is no pressure on the cervical, no pressure on the lower back. It's all hips. It's not, look, 900 pounds on the belted squat is probably only about 500 if it were a back squat,
it's a bit safer.
Something like that. Yeah, it's safer, and it's, I like it. My quads feel it the next day. You also get a lot of hamstring and glute in it too. It's really an overall leg developer. And then I'll do leg presses and other more quad specific work as well.
Hamstring?
Seated hamstring machine is my favorite. I'll also do RDLs, sometimes stiff-legged deadlifts, but there's just a great, and Bev's has probably 5 seated leg curl machines, 4 lying leg curls. I mean, you've got this enormous variety, but I've got one that I like a lot, and so that's what I gravitate to.
Glutes.
So, yeah, I think I use RDLs. I use, I used to do regular deadlifts, which I think would hit the whole posterior chain. You see a lot of the fitness girls in the gym will train nothing but glutes. You see these, or long extended glute workouts.
Mate, I've seen girls do hip thrust with 9 plates on either side, mate. These girls, these girls are deadlifting glutes.
Right. Yeah. And their glutes are massive, like wellness glutes. I like the hip thrust machine. I'll do that sometimes. Yeah.
Look, Rick, let me say it for you, Rick. At our age, we weren't introduced to the hip thrust for a long time, and we're probably not going to jump on it all the time. Let's face it, Rick.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, look, back in the day, no one was doing the hip thruster, right?
All right. It's here now. We got it. The girls are in the gym. We got it. But we ain't going to ask a bloke, how's your weekend, while he's doing hip thrust. That's we're just not going to go over there.
Bad form. Yeah, don't do it.
Calves.
So I like standing calf raises. There's a machine that it's actually a squat, kind of a hack squat machine, but if you do it facing the machine, the weight is on your front delts, very easy, feels good. You load a few plates, you put your heels off the platform, and you can go pretty heavy. You can go 5, 6, 7 plates each side, and feels great on the calves. You can get a good stretch, you can get a top contraction. So, and there you go. There's the workout.
Tibialis, but what about tibialis? Front of the calf.
Yeah, I see guys do the little every now and then I'll throw that in. That's not in the staple.
All right, I just want to do a disclaimer for Brett Contreras in case he's listening, and we talked about the hip thrust, mate. Genius and top exercise, and I do it sometimes, Brett. So I don't have a problem with it. It's just I think I've met Brett Contreras for taking the piss out of the hip thrust, and now we're mates. So I love the hip thrust, and I love what it's done to girls' asses. So at the end of the day, I have no argument on my side. You don't say anything, Rick. You leave it on my side. You leave it over to me. But
that's it. All yours.
All
that's
mine,
all you, buddy.
All right, Rick. Where can they find you?
So, rickcollins.com. So if you need, God forbid you need legal services of any kind, and I can certainly, from a criminal perspective, rickcollins.com is the place to go. But I try to help everybody in the fitness community. So somebody just reached out to me today. I need a lawyer for something nothing to do with what I do. I know a lot of people who are good lawyers, and so people come to me and I try to put them in the hands of somebody who's going to help them. So that's one place to find me. But certainly you can find me on Facebook. Rick Collins Online is my public Facebook page. Rick Collins ESQ is the place to find me on Instagram. I'm not on TikTok. I've never gone over to that. So, but Instagram, I do try to post a lot. And I think people, if you're in the fitness space, you'll find something interesting on my Instagram page.
100%. Well, Rick Collins, firstly, thank you for the new Collins exercise.
The Collins curl.
Collins curls.
Yep.
The Collins curls. I just want to say thank you, mate, for coming on.
All right. Well, no, thank you for having me. It was a great time, and I'll look for you online. We'll chat.
Hey guys, another podcast done with another wonderful guest. They're all greats, no matter who they are. To continue what we're doing and to keep supporting you, if you could subscribe, hit the notification bell, press like, it only helps us to grow this channel even further. We really appreciate the support, and to go and find more all around the world. Bring them here to Muscle Talks podcast and share real, raw and honest conversation around a sport we love, bodybuilding. Please subscribe. Thank you for watching this podcast. Thank you for watching all podcasts. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking.